Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition press conference for August 2nd, 2024. Joining today's press conference is Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament, Leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the Opposition. Today's press statement will be read by the Leader.
The more the government spends, the more money is lost through poor planning, mismanagement, and corruption. Last Wednesday, the government announced its intention to seek an additional $40 billion for its 2024 budget. This sum is on the back of its massive $1.146 trillion budget. We in the opposition will bet that this will not be the last request for a supplementary budget this year. In 2023, for instance, the government came to the National Assembly 5 times for extra money, totaling $116 billion, nearly 15% more than its initial budget sum. The more the PPP government spends, the more money is lost through poor planning, mismanagement, and corruption. The IMF estimates these losses as between 40 to 50% for every dollar spent. Therefore, in the 2024 budget, currently at $1,146 trillion, the Guyanese people will lose hundreds of billions of dollars. The PPP is inherently incapable of seeing this as the crisis it is. There is no evidence, for instance, that the government is responding to the recommendations of the IMF for a strong and effective public financial management system and a robust public investment management framework, as the IMF advised. The IMF has advised, for example, that government entities must be compelled to correctly cost investment plans and be trained in project preparation and appraisals. How much of this is happening under the PPP, if any at all? We have seen no policy, administrative, or legislative measures from the PPP to reduce the massive loss in public funds. Instead, we are presented with a bloated budget on budget day and several supplementary budgets throughout the year. It is now a well-settled fact that tens of billions of dollars are lost to the PPP's elite, friends, families, and favorites through their corruption network, and for the tens of billions lost through incompetence in the form of poor planning and mismanagement. On the issue of corruption, we must repeat our call that investigations must start with Vice President Barra Jagdeo and his ruling PPPC government. His sudden interest in tackling corruption is all a political hoax and is an attempt to shift blame to public servants and away from the corrupt PPP regime. As we stated at our press conference last week, I quote, "Everybody knows that the only families, friends, and public officials who are involved in these widespread acts of corruption are PPP connected, PPP appointed, or PPP members. In the short time remaining for the PPP in government, we in the opposition will continue to act as the people's guardian and watchdog. Money lost through corruption and incompetence is money that could have gone to increase wages and provide cost of living relief. As the next government, we will increase efficiency in public spending by, for example, adopting the IMF recommendations, by revamping the public procurement system, by beefing up the Auditor General's office, by giving teeth to the Access to Information Act, and by ensuring the Public Accounts Committee functions effectively. Guyana can and must do better. Opposition condemns Jagdeo's recent political interference in the judicial system. The opposition categorically condemns the recent attacks by the Vice President, Mr. Barajak, upon the magistrate presiding over the trial of the elections matters. The 9 accused charged, their attorneys, and the General Administration of Justice in Guyana. The Vice President's invitation to international observers and the international community to view proceedings, which by their very nature are public, and with the aim of, I quote, ensuring the people don't act or public officers do not act with impunity in the future, where they are vested with either a responsibility by the law or the Constitution, and they, in this case, in a partial manner, discharge their responsibility and in a corrupt manner, unquote, can only be viewed as calculated to coerce the court to find the accused person guilty of the offenses charged, regardless of what the admissible evidence before the court discloses. The Vice President has launched a vicious, unjustifiable attack against the integrity of the magistrate and the administration of justice as a whole by accusing the magistrate of entertaining frivolous objections, failing to record evidence, and of suppressing evidence, and has threatened at the very commencement of the proceedings to subject the ruling of the court to the scrutiny by the Caribbean Court of Justice. These unfounded allegations are clearly intended to cast the court and the administrators of justice in a dim public light from the outset of these proceedings. Information meeting the opposition is that Barajak is doing everything to frustrate and ultimately replace the present magistrate with a magistrate of his choice, who he wants to place there to ensure conviction, even if there's no case against the accused. Jagdeo must know that there will be serious consequences should he go down this chosen path to a conviction. The law should be allowed to take its course, free from political interference. In a truly democratic society, confidence must be reposed in the judiciary and the administration of justice, with provisions for erroneous interpretation of law or misapplication of the law to given facts. These errors, which are not uncommon in any democratic society, are reconcilable by the appellate courts. It is undemocratic for the executive to seek to coerce, whether by outright or inferential threats, the courts to bring about its desired outcome in any proceeding before the courts. And it is alarmingly sinister to seek to do this by casting aspersions upon the integrity and impartiality of judicial officers without justification. A review of the chronology of events in these matters from the laying of the charges against the 9 accused persons to date completely contradicts the Vice President's accusations of delay of these proceedings by the accused persons and their attorneys. The applications before the courts for the manner of trial, summary versus indictable, and the amalgamation of all the matters before a single magistrate were made by the prosecution and took time to be resolved. These were followed by cumbersome disclosure of multitudinous documents by the prosecution, which had to be regularized at the instance of the court. These actions of the prosecutions are now succeeded by the presentations before the court of large bits of evidence which were not disclosed to the accused persons, and much of which are inadmissible for relevance, hearsay, and other evidential breaches. It is this latter presentation of the evidence by the prosecution that has been met with the justifiable objections by the defense attorneys. Ghana is just a few months away from general and regional elections, which promise to be hotly contested. There can be no better time for the courts to be left to do their job, as they have demonstrated themselves very capable of. The outcome of these matters, whatever they are, ought to be the exclusive purview of the court and not the command of the government or any other political actors, including Barry Jack Dew. We have stayed clear of these proceedings since the serious progression of these matters. We only pause to condemn the wicked attempts of the government to instill fear in the courts by its threats and the disservice the government is doing to the good people of this country by its campaign of lies and misinformation about the conduct of these proceedings. The government is not without numerous instances within its ranks and throughout its various agencies to conduct serious and impartial investigation into corrupt practices. Energies and resources will be better focused there. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will take questions on the press statement. Mr. Adam Harris.
Yes, a very good day to everyone.
Good day.
Good day,
Now,
Adam.
I want to look at Jagdio's attack on the judiciary. This seems to be a common practice. Nandlal did it and all of that. Is there any way that the there is a Judicial Service Commission that can be appealed to, because judges on the whole don't come out to defend themselves. Is there anything one can do to have the judicial community sanction those who level attacks on the judiciary?
Well, I think we could start with the Bar Association. They're in a position to condemn it and to bring it to the fore. We have undertaken to raise consciousness on it, exposing it so that people know about it. What I can have done is for our persons who are involved, especially in international relations, to check to see what recourse there is to the UN or any other institution. I don't claim to have looked at that at this stage.
Why I ask that? I remember, and I did a little piece the other day, I criticized a ruling Justice B.S. Roy made, and he dragged me in front of the court for contempt. I don't know if there can be a campaign or a lobbying for judges to defend themselves by hauling their attackers before the court for contempt.
Well, it has its downside and its upside. The downside is you might end up with them having to defend many, many decisions, which will not necessarily redound to the benefit of the judicial system. Of course, if it is done, they have the opportunity to defend themselves. But I don't believe the solution is there. The solution lies in the government recognizing that the judicial system is independent of the executive, and they should desist from doing what they're doing with the aim of influencing the outcome of cases. There is where the solution lies.
Thank you. Questions on the press statement?
If nobody else, perhaps I can ask this one, and it has to do with the IMF finding that 50% of the budget is lost, and you said that the government is reacting or responding to the dictates of the IMF.
Recommendations.
Recommendations. So, sir, are you saying that the IMF is recommending that 50% of the Guyana budget be lost to corruption?
What the IMF is saying is that 40 to 50% of every dollar spent is lost. Corruption, we have said, through mismanagement and poor planning. The IMF contention is that there should be some things done to deal with it. And I quoted from the the need for a strong and effective public financial management system, and a robust public investment management framework. The government clearly operates outside of any properly outlined financial framework. The government operates as Lord and God and appears to want to do everything the way they see it, even if it is in violation of the basic rules. And so the IMF has made a number of recommendations. And we thought that if the government was interested in good governance, then they could have implemented those recommendations and ensure that we protect the nation resources from disappearing as a result of corruption, incompetence, mismanagement. But then the very regime is linked to the corruption. It is the regime that is not planning, that is mismanaging. And so I don't see them taking any action to change the situation. In fact, they are comfortable with this situation and are complicit in this whole question of corruption in the Guyanese society.
Thank you. All right, any other questions?
Like nobody. I know they're still celebrating Emancipation Day.
You can go ahead. You wanted to ask something else?
Yes, I do. I do.
Go ahead.
My question, currently you spoke about the level of corruption. And in the National Assembly, there was a statement by Minister Edghill after terminating a contract, no penalty for this contractor from Trinidad, I think the name is Guy or something of the sort. And he seized $115 million worth of equipment. In pursuit of proof for allegations of corruption, have you or the party been able to verify that the equipment at the value of $115 million was seized?
No, we have not been able to verify it. You know, the government, you can't trust anything that they would have said. I think some of those contracts normally would have clauses, and they should have been a deposit with bond, etc. We'll have to check to see if all of that were complied with. But don't forget, these companies were companies that the government was arbitrarily giving contracts, and therefore it is only that it is so bad that they are forced publicly to embarrass them. But the approach of the government has been to condone this kind of activity and to just appear to be dealing with it, when in fact they are not dealing with it, they are condoning it, and many of them are benefiting from what has been happening. When you look at that project, you should have known from the inception that it is corruption. I continue to say the second street that they're building parallel to it makes no sense. There is no rationale for it. I'm not an engineer, but I'd like the engineer to come to tell me what are the benefits from an engineering standpoint. When you look at what is happening there, it is just corruption. Money to give people to build a bridge, money to give people to build a road with no link to anywhere particular, because it's going back into the same road that you did through Prashad Nagara. It's one of the best manifestations of the corruption and incompetence of the government.
Any other questions?
Have you discussed a possible campaign with the other parties in the coalition to mount a vigorous anti-corruption campaign? Because talking about it here is one thing, but assuming that people are hearing, is this campaign being promoted on the ground? Are there meetings? Are there public forums? Will there be public meetings espousing the corruption that is happening at this time?
I'm at present, I begun engaging the joint opposition, and we will engage. We will do our program, but we will also engage the opposition to ensure that we have a united approach to the fight against corruption.
Thank you. Any other questions? Whether in or out of the press statement? All right. With there being no other-
No. Hold
Okay.
on. Let me.
Go ahead.
Comrade leader, I think you are in Africa. Could you give an update of why you went and what were the benefits of the visit?
Well, there are a number of benefits. As a political party, we have begun the process of engaging both in the Caribbean and in Africa. We have been engaging in the United States and Canada. We are expanding it so that we can engage in Africa from the standpoint of developing cooperation and solidarity between the two entities. In Africa, one of the things I was able to do, especially when I met the vice president of Nigeria, was to raise the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. And when I raised it, I found it interesting that the government of Guyana is not engaging. And so a lot of the people in Africa apparently are not up to date on what is happening with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. And I've said before in Parliament and out of Parliament that we need to develop special envoys that go to the capitals, put our case, and mobilize support so that also we had the International Decade of Africans in the Diaspora. There is a campaign to ensure that it is extended. That was one that was raised, and general cooperation between Africans here in Guyana and Africans in Africa.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. With there being no other questions, I want to thank our media personnel, of course, for joining today and our viewing audience. We hope that you do have a wonderful weekend.